Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Venice podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 7, The Secret Code. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing pretty well. I'm just, I'm riding solo here for a few days at my home because my husband took the kids to Moab for a few days. He will be mountain biking and they are along for the ride. Not mountain biking, just other activities in Moab, hiking, and they're going to be riding horses and doing fun things. I had to hang back at home because, well, good news. I booked a commercial. Yay! I feel like it's been months because it has been months since I've booked anything. So I am extremely excited, but the shoot conflicted with this trip. So alas, I am home alone, which is great in certain ways. You would think I'd be like so excited about it, but you can't win as a mom. Like you are like, I just want peace and quiet. I just want some time to myself. And then you have it. And then you're like, oh, I miss my kids. It makes no sense. It's pretty cruel, actually, that we feel this way. But I was texting with my daughter this morning and they are doing great. They're having a good time. We are lucky. We have good kids who love to travel. And even if it's a road trip, long road trips, they are all in for it. So we're lucky for that, and for that reason, I do want to travel more. And we're also terrible planners. We talk about traveling all the time, but actually getting it on the books and reserving things and all that stuff, both my husband and I need to work on that. But hopefully we'll get better so that we can take a lot of trips with our kids before they leave the house. All right, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Secret Code is as follows. George refuses to tell his fiancée his secret ATM code. Jerry is accused of making fun of a one-legged businessman after his leg falls asleep. Elaine is interested in a boring guy simply because he forgets her, while Kramer volunteers to help coordinate traffic routes for the local fire company and ends up driving one of the fire engines. This episode was written by Alec Berg and Jeff Schaefer. We start out the episode in George's apartment. Susan is off to get some cash. George says, yeah, I need some too. She said, oh, I'll get you some. And of course, she'll need his card and his code. And he's like, my code? And doesn't look too happy about that. Next, we're at Monk's and we hear George say, no way, he's not giving her his code. And Jerry's like, what? You're going to marry this woman, most likely. And George points out how the card specifies not to give out your code to anyone. And Jerry says, you're taking relationship advice now from Chemical Bank? And George just goes off on the whole us concept. Why is everything us? Why can't there be something that's just me? Is that so selfish? Actually, that's the definition of selfish. I love that line. And George asks about Jerry's code. Have you ever given it out? He's like, no one's ever asked, but if you want it, it's Jor-El, Superman's father on Krypton. So Jerry tries to pry it out of him and he says, nope, George never will give him this code. What if my life depended on it? And George is like, fine, if you were in some situation where the code would save your life, you can have the code. And Jerry gets up and starts walking around to get the blood circulating in his foot. It fell asleep. He said, I crossed my legs and I forgot to alternate. This man approaches that they know, named Fred. He's kind of looking at Jerry walking around. And he thinks Jerry's lucky to have his foot fall asleep. At least you have something to do. Elaine enters. Jerry asks Fred, oh, do you know Elaine? He says, no, nice to meet you. And then Fred exits. Elaine is kind of miffed. He said, nice to meet you. So we've met before at Katie Ash's party. We talked for like 10 minutes. Oh, and he didn't remember you? Jerry asks. And Elaine rushes out. Jerry asks, where are you going? You just got here. I got to go talk to him, she says. My take on this scene, Elaine's portion is super quick, but it's necessary to establish her plot in the episode. And I love that it's so urgent for Elaine that she has to leave right away. She needs to get to the bottom of this. It's so surprising that this man does not remember her. So next we're on the street and Elaine catches up to Fred. She tells him how we've met before, and she explains where they met and how they had a conversation about her uncle who worked at the book depository with Lee Harvey Oswald. Her uncle had told him the president's been shot, and Oswald winked at him and said, I'm going to catch a movie. And Fred is just looking at her with the blankest look on his face. Nothing's ringing a bell. And she says, we were right in front of the bathroom door. And he's like, oh, I remember that someone had played tic-tac-toe on the door, and the X's won. And they went diagonally from the top left to the bottom right. Elaine just looks at him, totally perplexed. My take on this scene, it's really funny. So Fred Stoller, who was a writer on Seinfeld, plays this role of Fred. And it's his demeanor that really cracks me up. He really gets the comedy here. The book depository thing is to me. I guess I'm too young to understand this obsession with the Kennedys. I mean, obviously it comes up quite a bit in Seinfeld in different ways. John Jr., the JFK reenactment parody thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't care about the Kennedys at all. I certainly appreciate the history of what happened to JFK and his brother RFK. I mean, it's all fascinating and stuff, but like the family now, like why they've been deemed sort of the royalty of the United States. Like, why do people still care? It's just a mystery to me. If I'm missing something, feel free to email me and let me know. But I don't care about the Kennedys. So whenever there's a reference to them, I'm like, bleh. The little detail that Fred remembers about the tic-tac-toe on the bathroom door is just great. What a like perfectly mundane thing for him to remember, but not remember a beautiful woman like Elaine. And I love JLD's reactions. There's just no words, just a little turn of the head and a look like, what? All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry's on the phone telling someone he'd love to do some TV commercials. Sounds like a lot of fun. Kramer enters and Jerry hangs up and tells him how he's going to do some commercials for Leap and Larry's appliance store. He just talked to Leap and Larry himself. And Kramer had just gone there because he got an emergency band scanner. He's going to watch the Watchers, Jerry. And then he gets distracted hearing a fire emergency over the scanner. Oh man, he would have loved to be a fireman. Then he gets kind of concerned. He hears the route that they're taking. They're heading straight into gridlock. He's very upset and he exits with a flourish. Elaine enters and wonders what's with Kramer, and Jerry just goes, eh. She's like, all right. She tells Jerry how Fred Yerkes remembers everything about that night except me. Jerry's like, I'm surprised. He doesn't meet that many women. So what are you saying? Jerry just shrugs. What's to be said? He doesn't remember you. Yeah, but why? I mean, you know. Jerry puts his hands up. Yeah, I know. You know? I know. And then Elaine notices the J. Peterman catalog on Jerry's counter. He says, yeah, you wrote a really good piece on the Himalayan walking shoe. I love that little callback. And she's like, yeah, it was too good. Now Peterman wants to take me out to dinner. And then she looks at Jerry. Oh, maybe you want to come with me? Why would I want to do that? She begs him, please, please. She can't sit with him. He tells these stories. It's going to be awful. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, he says. And she perks up with a big smile. My take on this scene, I love that little moment between Jerry and Elaine when she enters and sees Kramer, exiting with, with some concern. And Jerry's like, I don't have the energy. He's just like, meh. And she's like, yeah, all right. She just accepts it right away. It's such a common thing with certain friends. You're like, oh, it's the usual, whatever. So I love that little moment between the two of them. One of my favorite Elaine moments of the series here, that presentational kind of, Elaine knows she is hot and very memorable. And Jerry's response is just as good. I love the little, I know, what's he going to say? It's just, there's like different versions of the, I know. Like, I love that little couplets of dialogue. They're really fun. And great JLD physicality when she's begging Jerry to come. She's dragging her face down and then bounces back with that beautiful smile of hers. It's so cute, so funny. And why would Jerry agree to do this? I'm just wondering, like, this again seems like something he would never do, but the only thing I can think of is maybe to get material, not really to support Elaine. That's, I don't think, ever at the top of his mind. All right, next we're in George's apartment. Susan is really upset. She's berating George. She wants to know his code. And he's like, why is this so important? And she says, it's an indication of trust in their relationship and that they're not supposed to keep secrets from each other. And he's sure she has her own secrets. I don't know anything about your cycles. My cycles? Well, from now on, I'll keep you apprised of my cycles. Please. And she asks, anything else? And he's got an empty bottle of chocolate syrup. We're out of Bosco. All right, next we're in Leap and Larry's. Jerry is pitching some of his ideas to Leap and Larry himself, and he is loving them. He's always liked his comedy. Doesn't take cheap shots at anyone. Jerry's like, no, I don't. He apologizes to Jerry for keeping him there for so long. The renovation is just killing him. Then we hear Jerry's voiceover. My foot's asleep again. Leap and Larry gets up and talks about when he lost his leg in the boating accident. He's limping around. He got so depressed, he almost gave up the business. But now he feels rejuvenated. Oh, come on, Jerry, he says, I want to show you around the store. And Jerry gets up. He can barely walk. He's like, I'll be with you in a minute. So Leap and Larry exits, and Jerry kind of limps around trying to get the blood flowing again. Leap and Larry's secretary walks in and laughs. She thinks he's doing an impression of Leap and Larry. Leap and Larry comes back and sees Jerry limping around. He doesn't look too happy, and he walks off. Jerry follows him. No, you don't understand. The actress here who plays the secretary is Lisa Zelkin. It's kind of hard to say. Lisa Zelkin. She's appeared in Curb Your Enthusiasm, The George Carlin Show, Friends. She does not actually have a lot of credits, but I definitely remember her from Friends. She's one of Rachel's snotty friends, and I think she's great in this scene. Really good laugh acting by Miss Lisa Zelkin. And also, side note, the man who plays Leap and Larry, he is the patriarch of the Arquette family. So he's the father to the Arquette children. I thought that was interesting. I had no idea. All right, the next scene is in Jerry's apartment. Kramer has just come from Leap and Larry's, and he heard about what happened, and he's reprimanding Jerry for making fun of crippled people. This is what you've sunk to? Jerry explains how his foot fell asleep. The guy has one leg and still calls himself Leap and Larry. You'd think he'd have a sense of humor. You just joked yourself right out of that commercial, Munjamba, says Kramer. There was a whole story in the commentary about Munjamba. I won't remember all the details, but basically the two writers, Alec Berg and Jeff Schaefer, they used to play some video game. I think it was a basketball video game. They had fictitious players, and there was one name that they loved. And Munjamba wasn't the name, but it was the best Michael Richards could do to pronounce the name that it actually was. That was actually written in the script, but it just turned into Munjamba because that's all that Michael Richards could manage, apparently. Back to the scene, George buzzes, and Kramer is watching the news about that building that went up in flames. It was that fire he was listening to on the band scanner. He's like, they just don't know which route to take. And he brags about his own sense of direction, how it's innate. And Kramer exits. George enters. Jerry tells him that they're going to meet Elaine and Peterman at the Chinese place. George didn't know anything about Peterman. Well, if I had told you, would he have agreed to go? Of course not. Well, that's why I didn't tell you. And George is so annoyed. I don't even know Peterman. Now I'm going to have to be on all night. I don't like to be on, Jerry. I'd much rather be off. Trust me, you're off. Ba-dum-bum. Next, we're on the street. Fred is walking down the street, and Elaine is coming the other way. And she says, oh, hi, Fred. Hello? He has no clue who she is again. It's Elaine, she says. Oh, right, Fred says. She asks how he's doing. I'm depressed. Apparently he got a new shirt and the button fell off. That's it. Once the button falls off, I'll never fix it. Elaine's like, yeah, that's too bad. So he tells her, I'm going to go get some vitamins. I feel depleted. Elaine says, never take them. Yeah, because they make you nauseous, right? Yeah, you remembered. Elaine is so delighted. And he asks, want to have dinner tonight? Tonight? Well, you have other plans? No, none that I can remember. My take on this scene, I think it's a great scene. Very succinct. It's funny, moves the story along. Fred Stoller again, he's just so perfect as this guy. It's just absolutely the perfect casting. Apparently they were having issues casting this character, and Larry David thought of Fred. He's like, Fred Stoller should do it. This is exactly who he is. Now, Fred Stoller has a whole story here with his Seinfeld days, so I'll get into that later. But he had been a writer for just 1 year the season prior, but he wasn't renewed to come back for this season, season 7. But they remembered his demeanor and that he was also a character actor. So Larry David thought of him for this role, and it just couldn't be more perfect. I love his reaction when he doesn't remember her again. Hello? And here I think we're seeing another strike of desperate Elaine. I mean, Fred, let's face it, Fred isn't the most attractive guy, but yet Elaine is willing to go out with him. And I do think it's better this way. I mean, if the guy was hot or whatever, it kind of reminds me actually of the pilot that gives her the open lip kiss. Now, she was attracted to him because he doesn't pay any attention to me and he ignores me. That is totally understandable because, that guy was definitely, I guess, objectively more attractive than the Fred Stoller character. Fred isn't supposed to be a guy that's going to be dating a lot of women. So I think it's definitely better this way that Elaine is just willing to go out with someone like this because it's just unacceptable that he does not remember her multiple times. All right, next we're at the Chinese restaurant. Jerry is still on this whole code thing. He's giving George a scenario. What if he's locked up in Turkey? Jerry has his wallet. The only way to bribe the guards is with his code. Call the embassy, George says. Jerry says they're closed. It's a bomb threat. Turkey, huh? George says my card won't work there. Not on the Plus system. Peterman enters and introduces himself to Jerry and George, and he says to George, J. Peterman. George grabs the lapels of his jacket and says, J. Crew. Jerry just gives him a look. What the hell? Peterman tells them that Elaine won't be joining them, and he'll tell the maitre d' it'll just be the 3 bulls. He goes over to the host stand, and Jerry and George are so confused. Why does he want to just have dinner with us? Is he crazy? We got to get out of here. And Jerry says, weave your web, liar man. But George is, he's joking. Peterman returns and Jerry says, I just remembered I promised a club I'd do a set tonight and I'm sorry I have to go. No hard feelings, J. Peterman says. It'll be just he and George. Come, George, we dine. And then we have a quick scene. Elaine is on the street waiting for Fred, but he is nowhere to be found. We hear her say, can't believe this. Is this guy standing me up? All right, next we're at the Chinese restaurant. George is very bored as Peterman is telling his elaborate stories. He tries to change the subject. Sports? Do you follow sports? Then we have a quick scene of Jerry on his couch watching sports and eating popcorn. Next, we're in Peterman's car. George is thanking Peterman for the ride. I really could have taken a cab. Oh, nonsense, George, he says. It gives me a chance to tell you about my latest trip to Burma, where he discovered a very unusual corduroy. And then his car phone rings, and he's like, what? Oh, no, I'll be right there. Peterman tells George it's his mother. She's at death's door. I just pray to God we can make it there on time. And he takes a sharp turn, and George is thrown against the window. Next, we're at Elaine's apartment. She's on the phone with Jerry. He's telling her, I can't believe it. We were doing you the favor. She tells him how Fred asked her out and then stood me up. I don't get this guy. And you see what's happening, Jerry says. You're attracted to him because he doesn't remember you. She says, that's so sick. Well, that's God's plan, Jerry says. Anyway, how was the dinner? And Jerry chuckles. Well, when I knew you weren't coming, I got the hell out of there. What about Georgie? She asks. He didn't make it. My take on this scene, I like this conversation. Jerry needs to explain to Elaine why she needs to go out with Fred, which I think is funny. And I love the use of Georgie. I've said it before on this podcast. I think it's very cute when they have little nicknames for each other. All right, next we're at Peterman's mother's apartment. The doctor tells Peterman she's too weak, but will be happy to hear your voice. Mama, it's Chacompo. I'm here for you, Mama. She looks at him, and then she looks up and sees George behind Peterman. So he introduces himself. I'm George Costanza. I was having dinner with your son. And we have a little break, and it's the next morning at Peterman's mother's apartment, and George is asleep in her chair. And Peterman slaps his leg to wake him up and thanks him for seeing me through the night. I'm going to make a pot of coffee. Watch her, won't you? Who? He says. George is so confused. Mama. Just talk to her, George. The doctor seems to think it helps. Peterman exits and George walks over to the mother. He starts talking to her. He says he should really be getting home to his fiancée. They had a big fight. She wants to know my secret code, and I can't tell her. The funny thing is, I'd really love to tell someone because it's killing me. And he looks at her, and she pretty much looks unconscious. So he tells Peterman's mom, Bosco, the chocolate syrup. I love that stuff. I'd mix it with milk. It's my favorite drink. He's so relieved to get that off his chest. And all of a sudden, she wakes up and starts saying, Bosco! And screaming it, Bosco! Bosco! George is trying to shut her up. Peterman comes rushing in. What are you trying to say? She says, Bosco! And then dies. She's gone. Bosco? He looks up at George, who's just shrugging. No idea. The actress who plays Peterman's mother is Ellen Albertini Dow, and she's pretty much the cutest old woman ever. I mean, she even beats out Nana, I think. She's probably best known for her roles as the rapping granny in The Wedding Singer and the racist granny in Wedding Crashers. A lot of wedding movies. She attended Cornell University and taught dance and drama for over 30 years. And she was also an expert in the art of mime. I thought that was really interesting. And I love her. How can you not love her? She's adorable and really funny. What a gift to have her in this episode. Such a talented woman. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. George is so pissed at Jerry. Why did you bail on me at the restaurant? He's like, I didn't bail. Well, why couldn't you have included me in your excuse? Come up with your own, Jerry says. George says, I froze. I'm losing it. Come on. Maybe you're just in a slump. No, I reached down. There was nothing there. Now Peterman wants George to go to the funeral. Oh, just tell the code already, Jerry says as Kramer enters. No, I'm not going to tell. So Kramer thinks he can guess. Yeah, right, George says. All right, let's see. Birthdays are too obvious. No numbers. You're a word man. But what kind of man? Well, you're weak, spineless, a man of temptations. But what tempts you? You're portly, a little long in the waistband. But what's your pleasure? Is it the salty snacks? No. Yours is a sweet tooth. George is kind of getting nervous, but saying, get out of here. And Kramer's really honing in on it, says he always returns to his dark master, the cocoa bean. George is really getting nervous now, so he gets up and leaves. And Kramer's following after him. Only the sweetest syrup will satisfy you. You could guzzle it by the gallon. Ovaltine, shut up. Hershey's, shut up. All right, next we're at the funeral. George is concerned since he just saw Elaine check her watch. And he's afraid she's going to bail on him too. She says, I got a date. Peterman comes over and says to George he's still trying to figure out Bosco, a dying wish perhaps. George says, mothers say things. My mother goes babbling on and on like a crazy person. Elaine then conveys her deepest sympathies. Unfortunately, I've got to get going. George tries to hop on. Well, we both have to get going. I have a personal commitment, she tells to Peterman. Well, George says, personal. I mean, we both have. And Peterman asks what Elaine has to do. I'm speaking at a women's rights conference. Yes, and I'm speaking at a men's conference, George says. Peterman doesn't believe that for a minute. He says, Elaine, it was good of you to stop by. Fortunately, I still have George here to help me through. And he puts his arm around George. Elaine exits. And Peterman tells George that when he was a little boy in Costa Rica, he heard that mother had taken a lover. Perhaps Bosco was his name. My take on this scene, I love how Elaine is just in the mood to screw with George here. She has no reservations at all, no sympathy for him. And that little look she gives him, it's very brief, but she does look over at him after she says, I'm speaking at a women's rights conference. It's just gold. And you know what? Given how many times the men on this show have screwed Elaine over, I don't mind this choice at all. She owes him nothing. I do love this run or two of George just choking with his lies. Like even here, he's like, yeah, we both have to go. I'm speaking at a men's conference. Like he can't come up with anything. Definitely in a slump. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer asks Jerry if he wants to join him at the fire station. He made a map of shortcuts and he's going to rock their world. Jerry says, no, I got to go to Leap and Larry's. Oh, we gave you another chance. Jerry says, yeah, explained the whole thing and smoothed it all out. Well, the good thing is you're going to learn an important lesson, Kramer says. Jerry's like, no, I'm not. Next, we're at the fire department. The captain is telling Kramer his list of shortcuts is most impressive. And Kramer says, he has a lot more where that came from. And the captain says, you know what? Every week, a brash young hothead like you comes in thinking they know more than us. And the captain says, you know what? We have everything under control. All right, next we're at Leap and Larry's. Jerry's apologizing to Leap and Larry again about the misunderstanding. He says, oh, it's water under the bridge. And he invites him again. Let me show you around the store. I didn't get a chance last time. But Jerry's foot is asleep again. So Jerry stomps his foot to get the blood flowing and causes a can of some flammable liquid, maybe paint thinner, to spill over next to some wires, and they spark. Next, we're at the fire department, and we can hear a call for an emergency at Leap and Larry's. The siren is sounding, and all the firemen are rushing to the truck. Kramer is in the mix, telling them the fastest way to get there, and the captain tells him to stay out of it, Kramer. And he sees the fire pole and gets excited. Giddy up. As he slides down, he bumps a fireman who then slams against a pillar, and he's all disoriented. He tells Kramer he drives the back of the truck. I have to say, one of the worst deliveries ever. Sorry, actor who plays that guy, but man. We see Kramer's face just light up, and he tells the guy to take it easy. And he grabs a hat and coat and climbs aboard the fire engine. For those of you who don't follow Hot and Heavy on Instagram, first of all, shame on you. I have to always say that. Second of all, I need you guys to see my post about this scene where I just happened to pause it. It was totally by accident. I, make my notes. I pause it. I make my notes. And when I went back to the episode after I made whatever notes I was making, the man who was paused, it literally just front and center in the screen, looks like a very young Oscar Nunez, who played Oscar Martinez on The Office. So I have a still shot of that. I posted it to the Hot and Heavy Instagram. And I don't know, you guys let me know what you think. I'm like 100% sure. I'm not even 99.9. Like, it has to be Oscar. It just looks exactly like him. I actually tagged him in the post, Oscar Nunez. He has not responded at the time of this recording. And then I also emailed the Office Ladies podcast, so Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey, and I attached the picture and I said, hey, I think you guys have the the means to confirm this with Oscar, but I thought they would get a kick out of it. So we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted if I get any response, but also follow Hot and Heavy and let me know. All right, next we're on Elaine's date. Fred is explaining what happened when he stood her up. Said he had to go to his mother's place in Brooklyn to help her find her pills. She couldn't find her pills, and they were right there in the medicine cabinet. Can you believe that? Elaine is struggling to stay interested. She just sort of grunts a response. Oh. And he starts explaining the worst part of the journey to go to his mom's. It's a subway station to her house because there's no transportation. Then we hear Elaine's voiceover. She says, what am I doing? I'm on a date with this guy because he didn't remember me? He's demented. Listen to him. And then he's still going on and on about his mother. If he took a cab to her place, she would freak out. What are you doing? It's so expensive. And then he looks at her and says, eventually you'll meet her. My take on this scene, a lot of face acting here by the lovely JLD, and it's done perfectly, of course. The comedy here is really all Fred Stoller's performance. And again, it is hilarious. A more perfect person they could not have cast. I love especially the impression of his mother. What you taking a cab for? They're so expensive. All right, next we're back at the funeral home. Peterman and George are sitting on a couch and he just keeps repeating, Bosco, Bosco, really trying to figure it out. All of a sudden, a woman shouts out, there's a fire down the street. The whole block is going up in flames. Another terrible delivery. Sorry, actress who does that. And during the commentary, I thought this was really funny because I talk about it so much, but either Jeff Schaefer or Alec Berg, I don't know which one said it, but he goes, oh, that was Sally Exposition, everyone. So they just needed someone to make this announcement and, announce the next portion of the episode pretty much. So everyone rushes out of the funeral home except for George. He's just like, oh my God. And Peterman calls him, come on, George, let's go. Next, we are kind of flipping back and forth between the fire engine and Leap and Larry's. We see the captain seated next to the driver in the fire engine, and he's telling them which way to go. But then we hear Kramer on the radio, and he's suggesting a different way. The captain is so pissed. He says, Kramer, what are you doing back there? And he goes, well, the other guy was down, but Cosmo's got the caboose. Then at Leap and Larry's, Jerry is helping bring out all the boxes of appliances. Leap and Larry is panicking. Where's the fire department? He's going to lose the whole store. Meanwhile, Kramer is just having the time of his life on that fire engine, even though the captain is yelling at him. Back at Leap and Larry's, Leap and Larry tells Jerry to try the scanner, see if you can pick anything up. So Jerry turns it on and he can hear the captain telling Kramer he's all over the road. Jerry's like, Kramer? Then we see Kramer and he is indeed all over the road, losing control, and eventually crashes the fire truck. Oh, that's a shame, Jerry says. And then we're in front of a bank entrance on the street and there's smoke everywhere. This fire is going to eat up the whole block, Peterman says. And then he notices a guy in the ATM bank vestibule and he tells him to get out of there. Your life's in danger. But the guy says, my sleeve is stuck in the machine. It ate his card. So Peterman demands George to give him his card. He says, I don't have it. George, you're obviously lying. Now, come on. So he hands over his card to Peterman and he slides it under to the guy. The guy then, of course, needs the code for the slot to open, but George is just hesitating. Peterman is yelling, shout out your code. And the man is also yelling, the code, the code. And George is just like, I don't want to see it. There's a tag to this episode. They're in George's apartment. George and Jerry are on the couch. And Susan enters and gives him his cash and his card. She says, anyone up for Bosco as she exits, pushing George on the shoulder. And Jerry is reading the J. Peterman catalog and says, oh my God, look at this. And George reads a blurb about the rogue's wallet. It's where he kept his cod, his dirty little secret. Short, devious, balding. His name was Costanza. He killed my mother. All right, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side.
Hey fellas, guess what? Periods happen. Wherever you go, whatever you do, chances are a woman in your vicinity is experiencing her cycle. Let me guess, you never even thought about that. I'm not surprised. Women have been keeping their cycles a secret from us for centuries. Hi, I'm Michael Buttons, the creator of Michael's Cycles, a support system for the ignorant men who know nothing about their ladies' cycles. Look, I'm not mad at you guys, okay? I'm just passionate about being an advocate for menstruation. Michael's Cycles is full of information from what the heck is a period to tips on how to be a ragamuffin, which is a fearless supporter of any woman on her period. You'll find helpful videos demonstrating the proper way to treat a hormonal woman without being condescending. We'll show you kick-ass methods to help ease her cramps, and there's a whole section of recipes high in iron to keep your flowing woman strong. Thanks to my friend, Guy Fieri. Welcome to Beavertown. Guys, I don't want to be overdramatic, but if you don't subscribe to Michael's Cycles today, you're basically saying you hate women and their natural bodily processes. Yeah, I said it. So get on whatever device is in your hand and go to michaelcycles.antflow and subscribe to the only website designed for men to support females and their cycles. If you sign up for our email blast, you will receive a Guy Fieri heating pad. Michael's Cycles. Come on, guys. Like you don't get PMS?
And we're back. Okay, so there was some commentary for this episode. The writers of the episode, Jeff Schaefer and Alec Berg. There were just a couple of things I wanted to mention. They talked about Elaine's storyline here, and I just liked that they called out how this plot could have easily gone to either George or Elaine. And they decided on Elaine because the thought of a guy not remembering a woman like Elaine would be more odd. But they could see this also working for George in the sense of maybe not even a woman, but just a person not remembering him would really get under his skin. Like, I've met you like a billion times, whatever. But Elaine being offended on another level because of, she's so fucking hot. Like that just made it a little bit more attractive for an Elaine story. And they also drew this parallel, which I thought was interesting, which is another reason they gave the story to Elaine, was because there were definitely parallels to George's storyline in a previous episode where he became obsessed with Jerry's masseuse girlfriend because she just hated him so much. And so he needed her approval. So I didn't honestly even think about that storyline, but I definitely think because George had that storyline before, this was the right decision to have Elaine be the one who was not remembered. All right, now it's time to open Greg's sack lunch. And again, Greg is not feeling 100%. Last week, it was a shoulder injury. This week, it seems like it's an illness, but I'll let him talk to you about that. So the first thing I find in Greg's sack is just a statement of his current health. He says, "I'm under the weather with this year's nasty flu bug, so my sack lunch this week will be somewhat small." I was going to say his sack looks a lot smaller today. First, he says, "My overall thoughts on this episode is that it's not one of my favorites. Shivani, you are well aware of my feelings towards the J. Peterman character. It seems like each story where he's involved has him both hugely misunderstanding whatever situation Elaine, or in this case George, are caught up in, and using his power to punish Elaine in some way. It's not that different from the Steinbrenner character. It just gets old for me." Yes, I am well aware. I think that I just love his vibe. I really do. I don't like Steinbrenner either. I think that character is really annoying. Maybe, well, I guess J. Peterman's also, I was going to say maybe because it's a real person, but I guess J. Peterman's a real person. Either way, I just think that John O'Hurley is extremely charismatic, and the way he plays this character to me is hilarious. And also during the commentary, they were Jeff Schaffer and Alec Berg were saying how when they were watching the episode, they still could not believe that the man had never done comedy before. He was predominantly a soap opera actor and done, little spots here and there, but never like a comedic role. And he's like, it boggles the mind because he's so good at it. And he's just really playing it straight. He's just trying to play this like charismatic guy, who is obsessed with clothes and travel. And, but anyway, yes, we just have to agree to disagree, Greg, and that's totally fine. All right, next in Greg's sack, he says, Elaine's story with Fred, played by Fred Stoller, who always plays this kind of character when he's on screen, is somewhat weak compared to the excellence of her soup Nazi plot. Kramer's fireman story and Jerry's inadvertent mocking of a handicapped man are also fairly weak. Yeah, I mean, I actually really like this storyline with Elaine. I don't think it's really weak. I think because Fred Stoller plays it so well, and it's such a juxtaposition to Elaine, both in like looks and charm. And I just love that Elaine, she's just determined to be memorable to this guy. So I think there's a lot more they could have played with, but I'll get into that more. I think there's a lot more they could have played with. I do agree. It does not compare to her soup Nazi plot. That was just, that was a peak for sure for the Elaine character. But I don't hate this storyline. I just think, the fireman thing, whatever. And I think the Jerry thing, it's very shticky. I'm not sure. It's kind of hacky. So I'm not championing those either. So definitely agree with you on that, Greg. Next, Greg says, my favorite Elaine moment is when she's explaining to Jerry that this Fred guy doesn't remember her as if she should be memorable. Her nonverbal face is basically saying, it's me, come on, says it all. Oh yeah. Well, spoiler alert, that's my favorite moment too. It's everything about that moment is just delicious to me. Next, Greg says, while George gets a lot in this episode, it doesn't have the same premise. My favorite scene of his is when he and Susan are arguing and he says he doesn't know about her cycles. And she sarcastically says, from now on, I'll keep you apprised of my cycles. Susan gets a bad rap, especially after what Jason Alexander said about her. But rewatching this, she was a great character. I agree. I've gone into it before, and so I won't get into my tangent about Jason Alexander and his such jerk face comments he made about Heidi Sweetberg. But Yes, Susan is a fantastic character and Heidi Sweetberg plays her perfectly. I think she has the perfect balance of being sort of scary to George without being like incredibly overbearing. I mean, we see her in the Soup Nazi episode. You love your little Kiki, don't you? I mean, she wants to pull out this tender side of George, but at the same time, she's not going to put up with this bullshit. And with George, there's a lot of bullshit. So I love Susan. I think she's a fantastic character. Granted, I don't know what it was like to work with her behind the scenes. Fine. I don't know. I guess I'll have to take certain people's word for it. But as far as what she brought to the character and what the audiences saw, I think she's brilliant. And the last thing Greg says is, "That's all I have. Back to the NyQuil abyss I go." Thank you so much, Greg. Yes, NyQuil will help. And I am a big believer in Sudafed if you are congested. I know you have to like provide 14 pieces of ID nowadays to buy Sudafed directly from the pharmacist. But it's worth it. Oh my gosh. And the over-the-counter stuff, there was just an article, not the same, guys. Don't get the over-the-counter Sudafed. It doesn't have like the main ingredient that makes it work. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate you pulling through. Just so you guys know out there, Greg initially told me, "I'm feeling so awful. I really can't do the sack this week." And I'm like, "Don't do the sack. Just rest up. It's fine." And then we're messaging back and forth. And I think he just was like, I do have some stuff to say. I'm just going to say as much as I can. And, he provided a much smaller sack. Greg's sack was much smaller this week. I'm used to a more robust sack from Greg, but you know what? I'll take a small sack. It's better to have some Greg sack than no Greg sack. So now, speaking of that, we have to close Greg's small sack lunch. Now to my favorite Elaine moment. Well, I already spoiled it. It's that, with Jerry, Elaine is hot and she knows it. And my final notes for the episode. Like I said, I think it's a really fun storyline for Elaine and one that I wish got some more time. The concept of her being so bothered that she is unmemorable to this guy, regardless of how hot he is, it's so strong. I think it's such a human thing where I went through something similar to this at my first job out of college. I'd been accepted into this rotational program. So for a year, I was rotating through different departments of the company. And one of the rotations was going to Arkansas, where our Walmart team worked. So I worked for a music distribution company. We had a team down in Walmart. So I spent 3 weeks down in Bentonville working with our Walmart team. And the guy in charge of that team, he met with me. I was there for 3 weeks. I did a project for him that I had to present to him in a meeting. He took me to lunch. We spent time together. Look, he was higher up than me. I mean, he had a pretty important job. I'm not sitting there saying everyone should remember me. I'm not trying to be Elaine here. But I remember at the next big meeting, he came back up to Detroit where we had our management meeting or something. And I went up to him and said his name, and he literally almost did a Fred thing, hello. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Shivani. I rotated a couple months ago down there." Okay. Literally no recognition, just kind of almost was a little bit annoyed that I was talking to him. I was like, geez, look, I don't think I made a huge splash down there because truth be told, I was in fucking Bentonville, Arkansas. It wasn't New York City, let's face it. So, but yeah, it was really amusing to me and it did annoy the fuck out of me. So I sort of see what Elaine is saying here. So bottom line, I really like the storyline. I think it's relatable. I think a lot of us would feel this way if someone just constantly is like, "Who are you?" Now, in order to get more Elaine in this episode, I could have done with much less Kramer, the fireman stuff, don't care, and just more with Fred and Elaine. Fred Stoller, given what a fantastic character actor he is, he deserved a lot more. They could have just mined a lot more from the situation. Maybe Kramer and George were at that same party, Katie Ash's party, and he remembers them. And they maybe even, like, Kramer's like, I didn't even really talk to him. I just tapped him on the shoulder, like something. I just think that could have been really funny too. And when the storylines kind of merge all together and everyone's involved, that always makes it better. Just seems like there could have been more comedy there. And plus, it's sort of unresolved. I mean, she goes on the bad date, but that's where it leaves off. I feel like we could have wrapped it up a little bit more. But no, we needed to have Kramer on the back of the fire truck and driving and crashing, which I have to say, I mean, look, I know I have to look at it through the lens of it being in the 90s, 1995, but those effects are so hard to watch. And the inside look for the episode, they're all kind of bragging about how great it looked. Yeah, it really looked like Kramer was on that truck. And I'm like, I don't think so. I really do like the George and Peterman stuff. I think it's very funny. Jason Alexander and John O'Hurley together, they're really funny. They play off each other very well. And I also like those worlds colliding, like Elaine's boss and George. Why did that need to happen? But it did. And I thought it was a really funny storyline. JLD gets some moments here, funny moments, but for the most part, she is playing the straight character to Fred Stoller's fantastic performance. So on that subject, Fred Stoller, as I said, he was a Seinfeld writer for about a year for one season, and then he came back just to do this role the next season when he wasn't working with the show anymore. I was aware that he had written a book called My Seinfeld Year, and I was like, I need to read that. And then when I saw him in this episode, I was like, oh, this is the perfect week to read this book. Now, truth be told, I listened to the book on Audible. It was free. So it's called My Seinfeld Year. It was only like an hour and 45-minute listen. So I just kind of made my dinner and was doing some chores around the house listening to it. And it's good. It's an interesting look. I mean, obviously, I think you need to be a fan of Fred and a fan of Seinfeld to enjoy it or really be interested in the subject matter. But he talks about his experience as a writer coming from the world of stand-up and acting, and then kind of like he wasn't even really interested in being a writer, but Larry David saw him at a party for a mutual comedian friend. And he knew Larry and Jerry from the stand-up scene. He's like, we used to see each other at clubs all the time. They enjoyed as you can imagine, like Fred Stoller's stand-up, as he describes it, is pretty much what this character is. He's just kind of offbeat, says some really weird non sequiturs, like jokes that aren't jokes. He gives a bunch of examples in the book, but he's quirky, right? Like he's got a very distinct style. So at this party, Larry David kind of is annoyed. Like every comedian in town is writing a Seinfeld spec script, and we haven't gotten one from you. And Fred Stoller admitted, well, I did have some ideas, but I just figured he probably was inundated with stuff, so I didn't want to bother him, which is sort of a theme about Fred Stoller. He's just a very kind of shy, insecure person who doesn't want to ruffle any feathers and just wants to be accepted. He gets into his relationship with his mother, and he does impressions of his mother in the book, which sound exactly like the impression he does in the scene with Elaine. What'd you take a cab for? They're so expensive. Like exactly that voice he uses for his mother in his book. And she was a very nervous person. She was very anxious and wouldn't let him do anything that was the least bit risky. And so that affected him. Anyway, I'm getting off track, but basically he just said that it was really tough, tough to be a writer. It was very competitive. He doesn't name the writer who kind of sabotaged him, but he hints that there was a writer on staff who just every time Fred had an idea, he was like, I don't know, man, I don't think they're going to like it. He would just always try and get in the way between he and Jerry and Larry. And so he listened to that guy. He thought he could trust him. And so for that reason, he thinks he didn't really put himself out there enough for Jerry and Larry to hear his ideas. But he did end up writing some of the best, most classic storylines for that season and for the series. So he does chalk it up to being a really great experience, but also a really tough one as well, that he just felt like he never fit in the, in the group. But then, so after he didn't get asked back to be a writer, he went back to his acting career, and he really thought, that's actually what I want to do. I want to become a very successful character actor because that's what I do well. And so when he got the call to be in this episode, the Secret Code episode, he was so flattered. He was like, I just didn't think I made any impact on Jerry and Larry. I thought I definitely was just forgotten about completely, considering I didn't come up with too many ideas. So to know that Larry David, reading the script, going through auditions and not finding the person they needed, he's like, oh, well, this is Fred Stoller. Call Fred Stoller up. This is totally him. It just really meant a lot to Fred Stoller. So it was kind of heartwarming, that moment where he just felt so good that, okay, well, they do remember me. Ironically, it's about remembering him. So he felt very flattered about that. He does talk about shooting the episode and, shooting that scene with Julia on the street. He says, the street scenes were not filmed in front of a studio audience. They would just be filmed and then they would show it to the studio audience on tape to get the laughs at a later time. Julia, he said, was so nurturing and loved what he was doing. He's like, she was very encouraging, laughed at my performance. But she also said, hey, you got to hold for laughs, to let the joke land because they're going to be laughing. You can't hear it now, but you got to hold and, take some pauses so that you can have the laugh breathe. So he's like, I really appreciated her guidance and she was just very, very nurturing, which I love to hear. JLD, such a sweet, supportive person. And I think that's all I can say about The Secret Code. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's @HotHeavyElaine, so you can also check out the Oscar picture. On TikTok, it's @Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me any thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.